The two sisters struggled for years to save enough money and finally purchased an apartment, believing they were about to begin a joyful new chapter. However, they had no idea that the home they worked so hard to obtain was actually haunted. Not long after moving in, Joo-hee was pushed to her limit by the constant noise coming from upstairs, so she decided to attach sponge pads to the ceiling, hoping to reduce the disturbance. But just as she was about to finish, the annoying sounds echoed once again from above. Joo-hee quickly grabbed her camcorder to record the noise, intending to use it later as proof when confronting the upstairs neighbor. Yet in the following moment, a strange scraping sound came from the balcony. Suddenly the phone rang, and she casually placed the camcorder on the table facing directly toward the balcony. But on the other end of the call, no one spoke. Then, accompanied by a loud crash from upstairs, the lights in the apartment suddenly went dark. Just as she felt confused, the electricity returned to normal. Hearing the noise upstairs continue without stopping, she could no longer endure it and prepared to go upstairs to argue with them. She did not realize that at that very moment a woman's shadow appeared on the balcony, and the eerie grinding sound rang out again. And just like that, Joo-hee vanished. For days later, the company realized Joo-hee had not shown up for work, so they contacted the police, who soon reached out to her sister Joo-young. Because Joo-young had been living in the company dorm due to long overtime hours, she had not communicated with her sister for quite some time. When she returned home, she saw a note stuck on the door warning them not to make noise inside the apartment. Soon after, Joo-young entered and found the living room completely messy, while her sister's bedroom was in total chaos. She was furious at the sight and immediately tried calling her sister, only to find the phone turned off. She remembered how her sister had complained about constant noise from upstairs, but since Joo-young had hearing problems and could not hear anything without a hearing aid, she had never truly understood Joo-hee's emotional breakdown. She had even told her that since they had already bought the apartment, they should simply adapt to it no matter what, which left Joo-hee speechless. Joo-young began to suspect her sister's disappearance might be connected to the noise, so she went to Joo-hee's workplace to ask her closest coworker Ki-hoon about the situation. Ki-hoon said that whenever he talked with Joo-hee on the phone, she always asked if he could hear strange sounds, but he personally had never heard anything unusual. Later, Joo-young returned home and found her sister's phone, but it was dead and switched off. This felt extremely strange, because her sister usually carried her phone everywhere, yet now it had been left behind. She prepared to charge it, hoping to find clues. But when she bent down to pick up the charging cable from the floor, she unexpectedly noticed a large patch of mold on the ground. Before she could react, someone knocked on the door. After asking who it was, she learned the visitor was the resident downstairs in 504, who came to warn her to keep quiet. Although Joo-young explained that no one had been home recently and the noise could not have come from them, the man refused to listen. His eyes were cold, and he threatened that if the noise continued he would tear her mouth apart. After he left, Joo-young saw a long-haired woman standing motionless at the end of the hallway, which terrified her and made her immediately shut the door. After the phone finished charging, Joo-young tried to unlock it but did not know the password. The next day she visited the security office and asked the guard if he had seen her sister lately. The guard said that some time ago Joo-hee had come to complain about noise, but he had not seen her for a long time. When Joo-young mentioned the resident in 500 for always disturbing them, the guard explained that Jung-sim from 504 had also been troubled by noise and asked her to understand. He casually added that because the apartment was number 604, the neighbors paid extra attention to it. Just as the guard was about to explain what had previously happened in 604, a woman rushed in reporting a foul odor coming from the basement and asked him to check immediately. When the guard opened the basement door, a wave of stench poured out. He explained that for more than 10 years some careless residents had thrown garbage there, and over time it piled into a massive mess. To stop them, he had locked the basement door, but some still tossed trash through the window for convenience. Cleaning it would cost hundreds of millions of won, and since no one wanted to pay, the issue remained unresolved. A few days later, Joo-young quit her job and moved back home so she could focus on searching for her sister. That day also happened to be her birthday. Looking at the table filled with kimchi, she could not help but think about her sister. Joo-hee knew Joo-young loved kimchi, so every birthday she would prepare plenty for her, but this year there was no Joo-hee to share it with. At that moment, Joo-young had an idea and decided to try her birthday as the password to unlock her sister's phone. To her surprise, it worked. When she opened it, she found many recordings. She randomly played one, but after only 2 seconds a loud crash sounded in her ears. Because she was wearing her hearing aid, she could not tell whether the sound came from upstairs or from the phone itself. Later, she returned to the bedroom and continued listening. She heard her sister's voice full of complaints and realized how desperate Joo-hee had been. Then she heard what seemed like another person's voice in the recordings. Though she could not make out the words, she felt as if the voice was right beside her. Yet when she looked around, there was nothing there. The next moment, she thought she heard her sister whisper directly into her ear, frightening her so much that she threw the phone away. Not long after, the doorbell rang again. This time, Joo-young clearly heard her sister's voice outside repeating the same sentence over and over. Feeling that something was wrong, she refused to open the door and instead looked through the peephole. The figure outside had darkened pupils, clearly not Joo-hee. Then the strange grinding sound came again, mixed with piercing noise that tormented Joo-young until she collapsed to the floor. The next second, she suddenly woke up from sleep, but she still could not tell whether what had just happened was a dream or reality. Soon afterward, Ki-hoon came to visit her. During their conversation, she learned that he had actually been Joo-hee's boyfriend, and they had secretly dated for 6 months, but he had not been able to reach her for days. So he came seeking help. Together, they went to the local district office and learned that months earlier the woman who lived in apartment 604 had complained about noise and claimed to see ghosts. A few days later, a foul smell came from her home, and it was discovered she had hanged herself. After hearing this, Joo-young imagined herself eating at home, but the thought that there had once been a hanging corpse in the apartment sent chills through her entire body. Afterward, Ki-hoon followed her back home. And this time, a large note was stuck on the door once again, warning her to keep quiet. Joo-young believed Jung-sim downstairs must have done it. Soon after, Ki-hoon began creating missing person flyers for Joo-hee. Meanwhile, Joo-young received a call from the police asking if she had discovered anything new. She reported Jung-sim's threats and insisted her sister's disappearance must be related to him. But without evidence, the police could not arrest Jung-sim. From them, she learned there was surveillance near the building, but footage showed her sister had never left. Joo-young believed that since her sister's phone and wallet were still at home, and she had not gone outside, she must have been hidden somewhere inside Jung-sim's apartment. So she begged the police to investigate further. But without proof, they had no legal right to search his home. Not long after, the doorbell rang, and the visitor was Jung-sim himself. Ki-hoon stepped forward to confront him while Joo-young secretly watched from hiding. When Ki-hoon opened the door, Jung-sim saw it was a man and immediately changed his expression, but still glanced inside. Clearly aware that Joo-young was home, he then politely asked them to stay quiet and left without another word. Back at his own door, Jung-sim pulled out a hidden knife, as if the pressure from the noise had pushed him close to madness. Soon after, Joo-young began posting missing person flyers everywhere and noticed a young boy staring at the basement window. Curious, she crouched down to look as well. The boy soon stood up and left, so Joo-young used her flashlight to examine the area more closely. At that moment, Jang-in from 800 suddenly appeared behind her, warning her not to spread flyers in the complex because a redevelopment vote was approaching and the residents' committee would not allow scandals. If rumors spread, redevelopment approval could fail and housing prices would drop. Back at home, Joo-young stared blankly at her sister's missing person flyer. Suddenly, the door lock clicked open, and to her shock, it was Joo-hee who had been missing for days. Without thinking, she ran to hug her, but her sister pushed her away and walked straight into the bedroom. Joo-young rushed after her to ask where she had been, but when she entered the room, it was empty. Just as she felt confused, she heard a sound from the living room and realized it had been another nightmare. She went to the kitchen for water to calm herself, but accidentally saw what looked like a figure standing on the balcony. Terrified, she wanted to run, but Jung-sim suddenly appeared at her door repeatedly trying to enter the code. Luckily, the shadow on the balcony vanished. So she grabbed a kitchen knife and stepped onto the balcony to check. After confirming nothing was there, she looked through the peephole and saw Jung-sim had already left, finally allowing her to breathe again. By now, Jung-sim had been completely driven insane by the noise, searching floor by floor for the source. He soon lost patience and began shouting angrily in the hallway. As he turned, he suddenly noticed someone staring at him from the upper corner of a doorway. At that moment, the motion sensor light switched on, and he looked closer. He ran while glancing back until he accidentally crashed through glass and fell to his death. The next morning, Joo-young heard police sirens and rushed downstairs, only to learn that the dead man was Jung-sim. The officer she had spoken with earlier came to her side, and she immediately told him the victim was the resident of 504 and asked them to search his home for her sister. But the police said they had already searched and found nothing unusual. They suspected Joo-young was imagining things due to stress and warned her not to accuse others without proof. At that moment, the head of the residence committee also arrived and told her to stop causing trouble and damaging the community's reputation. She even claimed apartment 600 for seemed cursed because everyone who lived there eventually acted insane. Ju Young did not understand, so she went to 804 to find Jengin. Just then, a little girl ran past behind her, and Jengin explained it was her mischievous daughter. From Jengin, she learned that the woman who once lived in 700 for always accused her of making noise. To get revenge, the woman stood on a chair and banged the ceiling with a frying pan. But the noise disturbed the man living in 604 at that time, and in rage he stormed into 704 and attacked the woman with a hammer. Realizing what he had done, he fled. The woman did not die immediately, and in her final moments kept pounding on the walls and floor for help while the sound of grinding teeth came from her mouth. The neighbors dismissed it as noise and ignored it. When her body was discovered, the residents agreed to remain silent so redevelopment approval would not fail. From that day, the man from 600 disappeared, and no one knew where he had gone. Ju Young then asked Jengin, who was currently living in 704, explaining that strange noises could be heard from there every single day, but Jengin told her the apartment had remained empty ever since the woman's death. Ju Young was completely shocked by this answer. When she returned home, she found yet another note stuck on her door, which frightened her even more. She had always believed that the notes were left by Jung Sim from 504, but now that Jung Sim was dead, it meant someone else had been leaving them all along. This time, however, the paper itself was completely blank. When she tore it down, she discovered words carved into the door with blood, cursing her to go to hell. The following day, Ju Young once again began posting missing person flyers around the complex. At the same time, the redevelopment meeting was taking place, and the head of the residence committee tried to show sympathy by offering condolences for Jung Sim's death. But as Ju Young walked through the crowd, she noticed one of her sister's flyers being stepped on under people's feet, and a mixture of grief and anger ignited inside her like a burning fuse. Causing her entire body to tremble, she suddenly grabbed the microphone from the chairman and shouted loudly that her sister had mysteriously disappeared within this very complex. Declaring that she did not care about redevelopment at all, she only wanted to find her sister. The chairman rushed forward trying to silence her, demanding she stop immediately, and the two quickly fell into a heated argument until nearby residents stepped in and pulled them apart. But Ju Young still refused to give up, yelling that her sister must have been hidden somewhere inside the building. At that moment, Ki-hoon arrived at the scene, saw what was happening, and quickly pulled Ju Young away. He told her that through his own investigation, he had discovered there was no surveillance record showing the man from 600 for ever leaving the complex, which meant he might still be hiding somewhere inside. Hearing this, Ju Young suddenly thought of the basement, because the stench there was so overwhelming that no one had ever properly searched it. So the two of them gathered their courage and entered the basement together, splitting up to search through the piles of trash. While searching, Ki-hoon filmed everything with his camcorder and unexpectedly noticed a shadow moving in the corner. He tried hard to calm himself, then took out his phone to double-check, only to discover that the figure lying on the ground was actually the missing man from 604. As he slowly approached to see if the man was still alive, a sharp piercing sound suddenly rang loudly in his ears. In the next second, the man's head suddenly rolled toward Ki-hoon's feet. Meanwhile, Ju Young had found nothing and went to meet up with Ki-hoon, but she immediately sensed something strange about him. She tried to look more closely, but an unbearable screeching noise attacked her ears. Then she saw Ki-hoon's body twitch violently, and she nervously stepped backward. Suddenly, Ki-hoon rushed at her and knocked her to the ground, no matter how desperately she called his name. There was no response. His eyes were now filled with murderous intent, as if he were possessed by something. In that critical moment, Ju Young grabbed a nearby stone and struck Ki-hoon on the head, barely managing to escape with her life. She quickly climbed up a ladder to get out, but Ki-hoon grabbed her legs from behind, just as everything seemed hopeless. The head of the residence committee suddenly appeared and saved her. When Ju Young woke up, she found herself lying inside the property office with her wounds already bandaged. She was shocked to learn that it was actually the head of the residence committee who had saved her life. The chairman explained that she happened to pass by the basement, saw Ju Young in danger, and immediately helped her, and that the police had already been called to investigate the basement area. Ju Young's attitude toward her began to soften, and soon they started talking more openly. During their conversation, Ju Young mentioned that throughout the entire complex she had only seen two children, one being the chairman's son and the other Jeng In's daughter from 804. But after hearing this, the chairman showed a confused and disbelieving expression. Realizing something was wrong, Ju Young was stunned because she clearly remembered seeing a little girl inside Jang In's apartment. At that moment, Ju Young received a call from the police. When she arrived near the basement entrance, she was horrified to learn that Ki-hoon was already dead. She told the police that she had once seen an iron door inside the basement and suspected her sister might be trapped behind it. However, the police insisted they had already searched thoroughly and found no such door at all. They believed Ju Young's trauma and stress had caused her mental state to become unstable. And they sternly warned her not to return to the basement again. But Ju Young refused to give up any possible chance, so she secretly went back into the basement alone. Inside, she discovered her sister's camcorder. One of the videos showed Ju-hee entering apartment 804, where several vibration machines had been installed, clearly proving that the noise had been artificially created by Jang-in. The footage also captured disturbing scenes of Jang-in using her mother's voice while speaking to someone invisible, even though no one else could be seen in the room. Ju Young then heard a faint sound nearby and followed it carefully, eventually finding her sister hiding weakly in a dark corner. Ju-hee was already on the verge of death. So, Ju Young quickly carried her and tried to escape. But Jang-in was already waiting at the basement exit, smiling while holding a hammer in her hand. Ju Young quickly shut the iron door and dragged her sister in another direction. But after circling through the basement, she realized there was no other exit. She hid her sister first and then went to confront Jang-in alone. From Jang In's own mouth, she learned that the woman from 704 had also died at her hands. Because that woman constantly complained about Jang In's daughter making noise, Jang-in became furious. One day she allowed her daughter to go play downstairs. But an accident occurred and a delivery truck killed the child. Jang-in blamed everything on the woman from 704 and decided to take revenge. Jang-in slowly approached Ju Young, preparing to kill her. Seeing this, Ju Young turned and ran, hiding temporarily in a safe corner. The eerie grinding noise returned again, accompanied by a piercing screech. Unable to endure it any longer, Ju Young quickly removed her hearing aid, and the world instantly fell silent. But in the very next second, Jang-in suddenly appeared right in front of her and struck her hard on the back with the hammer, causing her to collapse. Jang-in climbed on top of her, raising the hammer to deliver the final blow. At that exact moment, the grinding noise sounded again, giving Ju Young a brief chance to escape. As she tried to shut the door behind her, Jang-in rushed forward, begging desperately for her life. But Ju Young accidentally saw the terrifying eyes of the woman from 704 and was frozen with fear. In the end, she chose not to save Jang-in and slammed the iron door shut. Just like the woman from 704 before her, Jang-in began pounding violently on the iron door, but no one came to help because the residents would only dismiss it as noise. Finally, Ju Young left the basement carrying her sister to safety. Days later, a new neighbor who had just moved into 704 came to visit her with small gifts and promised she would be careful not to maw Noise upstairs. And that is the full story of the 2025 Korean horror film Noise. The movie is somewhat similar to 80 for Jegamedio, as both use noise as a central theme to reflect on social pressure and human psychology. The horror atmosphere was strong and effective. Although the storyline itself felt somewhat chaotic, that concludes today's sharing. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.